Yeah, I'm your host tonight, Joan Cullinane. Tonight's radio drama was recorded before a live audience on Saturday, December 21st at the Anchorage Senior Activities Center. This play is based on the timeless classic by Charles Dickens and has been adapted by Carrie Smith. Our players in tonight's radio drama are Jim Haacke and Shanice Lawton, Alec Rogers, Mark Galbraith, Brian Coleman, Tim Peters, Alex Summerlin, Eli Borden, Robert London, Scott McGrath, Mike Borden, Lindsey Sam, Leah Hughes, Betsy Winkle, Stacy Cronin, and myself. Our Foley's effect designer and director tonight is Jana Lahey, assisted by our own theatrical director, Carrie Smith. Our musicians tonight, Ben and Max Richardson. And now, join us as we journey through the heartwarming tale of Ebenezer Scrooge and the spirits who visit him on one fateful Christmas Eve as ACT brings you A Christmas Carol.
Stave 1, Marley's Ghost. To begin, Marley was dead. There is no doubt about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner, Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge's name was good upon anything he chose to sign his name. Of course, Scrooge knew old Marley was dead as a doornail. How could it be otherwise? For Marley was his partner in business, his executor, administrator, residuary legatee, sole friend, and Scrooge his mourner. There was no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come from the story that I'm about to relate. On Christmas Eve in the days of yore, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. I say his counting house, though the weathered sign above the door read Scrooge and Marley, because Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. Sometimes people new to the business called him Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both names as it was incoming business and all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted, squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, secret, self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, and stiffened his gait. He carried his own low temperature always about with him, and it didn't thaw 1 degree at Christmas. No one ever stopped him in the street with a glad tiding or an inquiry to his health. No beggars implored him, no children skipped beside him, and no woman blushed at his glance. Even the blind man's dog appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming, the beast would tug its owner into a doorway or the other side of the street. But what did Scrooge care? It was his preferred existence, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. This particular Christmas Eve was certainly no different than others in the past. The door of Scrooge's office was open so that he might keep an eye on his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, was copying letters. Scrooge had a small fire in his office, and the clerk's was so much smaller, requiring him to pull his white comforter tighter around his shoulders and warm himself at the insignificant candle at his desk.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
Bah! Humbug!
Christmas? A humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure.
I certainly do. Merry Christmas. What reason have you to be merry? What right have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then. What right have you to be dismal? What right have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Bah!
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item presented dead against you? Oh, if I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart, he should.
Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you? What good has it ever done you?
There are many good things from which I might have derived good by, which I have not profited, I dare say. But I have always thought of Christmas time, when it comes around, as a good time. A kind, charitable, forgiving, and pleasant time. The only time I know of when men and women seem by one constant to open their shut-up hearts and to think of people as fellow passengers to the grave, and not as creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good and will do me good. And I say bless it.
Here, here.
Let me hear another sound from you, Cratchit, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
I shall see you in hell first.
But why? Why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. An idea perhaps more ridiculous than Christmas. Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you, and I ask nothing of you. Why can we not be friends?
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trail in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family talking about a Merry Christmas. Now who's here to disrupt my day?
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. Died 7 years ago, this very night.
We have no doubt his liberality was represented in his surviving partner.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provisions for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this present time. Many stand in want of common necessities and comforts.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
They are still, although I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then?
Both very busy, sir.
I'm very glad to hear it. I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to them, or to stop them from their useful course.
Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy them poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
Oh, you wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, sir, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it quickly and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so people ran about with blaring lamps, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds. The brightness of the shops where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers' and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. Foggier, yet colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol.
God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay.
Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and congenial frost. At length, the hour of shutting up of the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool.
You'll want all day off tomorrow, I suppose.
If convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I were to stop half a crown for it, you would think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound.
It's only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pockets every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning.
Bob Cratchit promised that he would, and Scrooge growled out of the door. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on Cornhill at the end of a lane of boys, 20 times in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to play at Blind Man's Bluff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in the tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers that once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy set of rooms in a building that was old and dreary. Nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Like a beacon through the fog, Scrooge could see the very large knocker on the entry door. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker, and Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his partner, dead 7 years, that afternoon. Now, let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face! It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects of the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, and looked at Scrooge as Marley used to, but with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. Despite the face or its expression, its livid color made it horrific beyond its control.
Scrooge!
To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, looking cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified by the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. He closed the door with a bang, and the sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above appeared to have a separate peal of echoes, but Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door, walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming the candle as he went. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and double-locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secure against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. What a low fire it was, nothing on such a bitter night, and Scrooge was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell that hung in the room for some purpose now forgotten. As he looked, he saw this bell beginning to swing. It swung so softly at the onset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang loudly, as did every other bell in the house. Scrooge shook in great astonishment and strange, inexplicable dread. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed like an hour. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the bell ceased. But a clanking noise now succeeded the sound, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over casks in a wine merchant's cellar. An unseen door flew open with a booming sound, and he heard a noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards the door.
Somebody still. I won't believe it!
Then, without a pause, it came through the heavy door and passed through the wind before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leapt up and fell again. Marley's ghost. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots, the tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail, and his coat skirts, and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped around his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel.
Oh, now, what do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
You're particular for a shade. Who were ye then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. You don't believe in me.
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because the little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. It may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, or a fragment of undigested potato. There's more gravy than grave about you, whatever you are. Humbug, I tell you, humbug! Mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must, but why do you come to me?
It is a requirement of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad his fellow man and travel far and wide. If that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so in death. Oh, woe is me! The spirit is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness!
You're fettered. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is this pattern strange to you? Would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was as full and heavy and as long as 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since, and oh, it is a ponderous chain.
Jacob, old Jacob Marley, speak comfort to me.
I have none to give. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. In life, my spirit never walked beyond our counting house and never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing holes. Weary journeys lie before me, no rest, no peace, insensate tortures of remorse. Oh, captive, bound, and double iron, not to know that ages of incessant labor by mortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of it, which is all susceptible, is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its own little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space and regrets can make amends for one's life opportunity missed. And yet such was I, such was I.
But you're always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. At this time of the year, I suffered the most. Why did I walk through the crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star that led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light could have conducted me? Hear me. My time is nearly gone. I am here to warn you, Ebenezer, that you have a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring.
You were always a good friend, Jacob.
Hey, you will be haunted by 3 spirits. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the trap I've had. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over with, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, the third upon the next night when the last stroke of midnight has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and for your sake, remember what has passed between us.
The apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience, but in surprise and fear, for he became aware of confused noises in the air. Incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret filled the night air, mingled with inexpressible wailings, sorrowful and self-accusatory lamentations taken with the wind. The spectre joined in the mournful dirge and floated out into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge, desperate in his curiosity, followed to the window and looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few were linked together, but none were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant who saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was, clearly, that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist, or the mist shrouded them, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And being from the emotion he had undergone, the fatigues of the day, his glimpse of the invisible world, the dull conversations of the ghost, and the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant.
Stave 2, the first of the 3 spirits.
When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. He listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong.
Wait, it is impossible that I have slept through a whole day and far into another night. It is impossible that anything has happened to the sun, and this is 12 at noon.
The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold. There was no sound of people running to and fro, making a great stir. This was a great relief to Scrooge, so he went to bed again. He thought and thought and thought over and over again. The more he thought, the more perplexed he became. The more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chimes went 3 quarters more, when he remembered on the sudden that the ghost had warned him of the visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour had passed.
Quarter past? Half past? A quarter to it? The hour itself and nothing else.
He spoke before the bell ended, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed into the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside. Drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Scrooge found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor who drew as close to him as I am now to you. It was a strange, like a child, yet not so like a child. It's like an old man viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having been diminished to a child's proportion. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, but the tenderest bloom on the skin. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in a singular contradiction of the wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet light, by which all was visible.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past.
No, your past.
Please, I beg of you to cover the light. It blinds me.
What would you so soon put out with worldly hands? The light I give. Is it not enough that you are the one whose passions force me to, throughout the year, wear it dim and dull?
I do not mean to offend. I have not willfully bonneted your light at any period of my life. What business do you have here with me?
Your welfare. Nay, your reclamation. Take heed. Rise and walk with me.
It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes. The bed was warm, the thermometer long way below freezing, that he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and nightcap, and that he had a cold upon him at that time. The grass, though gentle as a woman's, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding the spirit move towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication. Feeling the mortal tense in fear, The spirit gently guided Scrooge's hand to its heart, and the pair passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either side. The city had entirely vanished, as did the darkness and the mist of the night, for it was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground.
Good heaven, I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
'Tis but a blemish. Pray, ghost, lead me where you will.
You recollect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfolded. Strange to have forgotten it for many years. Lead on.
They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies were now seen trotting toward them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits and shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. Scrooge knew and named every lad who passed. He was rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them. His cold eyes glistened, and his heart leapt up as they went past. He was filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas as they parted ways through the crossroads for their homes.
The school is not quite deserted. I see a solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know, poor boy. I wish... But it's too late now.
What's the matter?
Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
Let's see another Christmas.
Dear brother! Dear brother! I've come to bring you home, brother. Home! Home! Home, little man? Yes! Home for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be that home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one night that I was not afraid to ask him once more if he might come home. And he said, yes, you should. He sent me in a coach to bring you. You're to be a man and are never to come back here. But first, we're to be together all Christmas long and to have the merriest time in the world.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart.
So she had. You're right. I'll not again say it, Spirit. God forbid.
She died a woman, and had, as I think, children.
One child. My nephew.
Ah, yes. Another Christmas then. Do you know this place?
Know it? I should say so. I was apprenticed here. Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart. Fezziwig alive again.
You ho there! Ebenezer! Dick! Yo ho, my boys! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up before a man can say Jack Robinson. Hilly ho! Let's have lots of room here. Hilly ho, Dick! Cheer up, Ebenezer! Clear away, my lads!
Every movable was packed off as if it was dismissed for public life forevermore. The floors were swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry a ballroom as you could desire to see upon a winter's night. In came the fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile, the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable, the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke, all the young men and women employed in the business, the housemaid with her finger, the cousin, and in they came one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, and in all they came anyhow and everyhow. To fill a plate and away they all went. 20 couples had built, hands half round, back again the other way, down the middle, up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate groupings. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig clapped his hands and stopped the dance, cried out, "Well done!" And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of port, especially provided for that purpose. There were more and more dances. There was cake and negus and a great piece of cold roast. There was minced pies and plenty of beer. During the whole of this scene, Scrooge acted like a man out of his wits. But it was not until everyone retired and the bright face of his former self turned away did he remember the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking upon him while the light upon its head burnt very clear.
A small matter to make these silly folks so grateful. He has spent but a few pounds for your mortal money. 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. To say his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add or count them up, what then? The happiness he gives is great. As great as if it cost a fortune.
What's the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
My time goes short. Quick!
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dearling of the world. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of health.
You fear the world too much. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your other, nobler aspirations fall off, one by one, until the master passion, gain, engrosses you.
What then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I'm not changed towards you, am I?
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor, and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You have changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you were. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? No. I would gladly think otherwise if I could, heaven knows. When I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You who in your very confidence with her weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so,
Do I not know that repentance and regret would surely follow? I do. And I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will, have pain in this. A very, very brief time. And you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly as an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight in torturing me?
One shadow more.
No more. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
But the relentless ghost pinned him in both his arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat Belle, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated mind could count. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she, with laughing face and fluttered dress, was borne towards it, the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught that was made upon the defenseless porter, the scaling of him with chairs to dive into his pockets, the spoiling him of brown paper parcels, hold him tight by his cravat, hug him around the neck, pummel his back, and kick his leg in irrepressible affection, the shouts of wonder and delight with which each development of every package was received, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they are all indescribable alike. It is enough that by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor and by one stair at a time up to the top of the house, where they went to bed and so subsided. And now, Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside. And when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful, as full of promise, might have called him father, and in the springtime, in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed.
Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon.
Was it?
Yes.
How can I? Don't I know? Mr. Scrooge.
Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his off this window as it was not shut. He had a candle inside. I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I heard. There he sat alone. Quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirits, remove me from this place!
These were shadows of things that have been. That they are what they are, do not blame me.
Remove me! I cannot bear it! Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!
He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which, in some strange way, there were fragments of all the faces it had shown him, wrestled with it. In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by the effort of its adversary. Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright and dimly connecting that with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher cap and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it so that the extinguisher covered its whole form, but though Scrooge pressed it down with all his might, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood of the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore and sitting up to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time for the special purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But finding that he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of the curtains this new spectre would draw back, he put them aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing. And consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, and yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blazing blaze of light streamed upon the floor when the clock chimed the hour. This light was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, and he was powerless to make out what it meant. At last, however, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room. This idea taking his full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called to him.
Scrooge! Come in, man, and know me better.
It was his own room. Well, there was no doubt about that. But it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were hung with living green, that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as the dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, and many a winter season gone. Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultry, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, minced pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping around the door.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me, look upon me. You have never seen the likes of me before.
The giant was clothed in one simple deep green robe, or mantle bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free of its genial face, sparkling eyes, open hand, cheery voice, unconstrained demeanor, and joyful air. Girded around its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust.
I have never seen such a man, sir. and never in my own chambers.
Have you never walked forth with the younger members of my family? Meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers these later years?
I don't think I have. I'm afraid I have not. Have you had many brothers, Spirit?
More than 1,800.
A tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have time and to teach me, let me profit from it.
Touch my robe.
As with the first spirit, Scrooge's chambers were transformed in an instant. And they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where the people made a rough but brisk and unpleasant kind of music, scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings and the tops of their houses. There was nothing very cheerful in the climate or town, yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad, with the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruitiers were radiant in their glory. The grocer's shop was nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down, or only 1. But through those gaps, such glimpses! The scales descending on the counter made a merry sound. The twine and roller parted company so briskly, the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, and even that blended scent of tea and coffee was so grateful to the nose, and to the almonds that were so extremely white, with sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, and other spices so delicious, even the coldest lawnmowers felt faint and subsequently valueless. But soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. The Spirit stood behind Scrooge, and as the parishioners passed, the Spirit sprinkled incense from his torch on each of them.
Is there a peculiar flavor in which you sprinkle from your torch?
There is, my own.
Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?
To any kindly given, to a poor one most.
Why to a poor one most?
Some upon this earth of yours lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are estranged to us and all our kith and kin, as if they had never lived. Remember that in charge, they're doing it themselves, not us.
They went on, invisible as they had before, into the suburbs of the town, and straight to the threshold of the door of the Cratchit dwelling. Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out poorly in a twice-turned-down gown, but brave in ribbons, which made a good show for sixpence. She laid the cloth on the table, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons. 2 younger children, a boy and a girl, danced around the room, exalted by the smell of the potatoes young Master Peter Cratchit was tending in the saucepan perched above a hearty fire.
What has ever got your precious father, then, and your brother, Tiny Tim? And Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour.
Here's Martha, Mother. Here she is.
Here's Martha, Mother. Hooray, you're such a goose, Martha.
Why, bless my heart alive, my dear. How late you are.
We had a deal of work to finish up last night and had a clear way this morning, Mother.
Well, never mind, so long as you are here. Sit down before the fire, my dear. Have a warm. Lord bless you.
No, no. Father is coming. Hide, Martha. Hide.
Hello, love. Hello, children. Now, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming on Christmas Day?
Here I am, Father.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. Now, sometimes he is thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinking the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember on Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men to see. I believe he's growing, my dear, getting heartier every day.
Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth, it was something very like it in that house. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a corner at the table, and the two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves. And mourning guard upon their post crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should streak for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit slowly held aloft the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. And when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight all rose around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Mama!" In time the pudding was out of the copper. In half a minute Mrs. Cratchit entered flushed, but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quart of ignited brandy, and festooned with Christmas holly stuck on top.
Oh, wonderful pudding! It is the most tremendous success, my dear, since our marriage.
I must confess I had doubts about the quantity of flour, but now the weight is off my mind.
Perfect, Mother.
I'll remember this pudding forever.
At last the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. Apples and oranges were placed on the table, and a shovel full of chestnuts was on the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew around the hearth and held out an assortment of mismatched vessels, into which Bob Cratchit poured hot drink.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, oh no, kind spirit, say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population.
You use my own words against me.
If a man you be in heart, forbear these wicked words until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. You will decide what men shall live and what men shall die. It may be that in the sight of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. To hear the insect on the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust.
Aye, mercy, aye.
Mr. Scrooge, I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. Give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children. Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard-feeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, but not for his. Long life to him, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. The mention of Scrooge cast a dark shadow on the party, but after it had passed, the family was 10 times merrier than before. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scanty, and they very likely had known the inside of a pawnbroker's shop. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. When they faded and looked happier yet into the bright sprinkling of the spirits torch at the party, Scrooge had his eye upon them, especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. Presently, the spirit and his charge left the merriment of the Cratchit home and walked along the streets. Each house glowed with the same cheerfulness and gaiety as the one before. The brightness of the roaring fires in the kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was beautiful. Children of the houses were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, and aunts, joy beaming from rosy cheeks and sparkling eyes. A group of handsome girls, all hooded and fur-booted, and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbor's house. The lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with the specks of light, and who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed. The exuberance of the man's laugh caught Scrooge off guard, and he turned to see the spirit sprinkling blessings from the glowing torch he held aloft. Without a warning from the ghost, the pair lighted upon a bleak desert moor.
What place is this?
A place where miners live and labor in the bowels of the earth. It may look desolate and sullen to you, but they know me. And here, look into the lighthouse, standing vigil against the raging sea from the outside. It appears bleak and cold, but the inhabitants know me. And here, every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, has a kinder word for one another on this day, more than any other day in the year. They know me.
He said Christmas was a humbug. As I live, he believed it too.
More shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow. That's the truth. And not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment. And I have nothing to say against him. He's very rich, but his wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking that he is ever going to benefit us with it.
I've no patience for him.
Oh, I have. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried, and I'm quite sorry for him. Who suffers from his ill whims? He himself always. He takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come to dine with us. What's the consequence? By taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us, he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he finds in his own thoughts, either in his moldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, for I pity him. He may rail against Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year saying, "Uncle Scrooge, how are you?" If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk 50 pounds, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday.
I shall not have the old penny pincher ruining our party, Fred. Give us a game, love.
Yeah, as you wish, dear. This game is yes and no. I will think of something, and the rest of you must find out what it is with me only answering yes or no. Ready?
Is it an animal?
Yes.
Is it brought to market?
No.
Agreeable?
Is it brought to be shown?
No.
Grunts and growls.
Yes.
Savage.
Yes.
I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's your Uncle Scrooge.
I toast to Uncle Scrooge. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge.
The whole scene passed off with the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close to home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In the almshouse, hospital, and jail. In misery's every refuge where vain man in his brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out, he left his blessings. It was strange while Scrooge remained unaltered in his own outward form. The ghost grew older, clearly older. And though Scrooge had observed his change, he didn't speak of it until they left a children's 12th night party, when looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, he noticed that his hair was gray.
Are spirits' lives so short?
Mine upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight at midnight. Hark, the time draws near.
Forgive me if I'm not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange and not belonging to yourself protruding from your skirts. Is that a foot or a claw?
It may as well be a claw for all the flesh there is upon it. Look here!
They are not children, but not monsters. What then? Are they yours?
They are man's, and they cling to me, appealing to their fathers. This boy is ignorance, and this girl is want. Beware them both in all of their degree, but most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12, and Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifted up his eyes to behold a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him.
Welcome back. The second half of our production is brought to you by Codwall of Negus, the lemony port wine beverage that your mother warned you about. Served only at the finest taverns and raucous holiday parties, our negus will inspire you to dance to the point where you wink with your legs. Codwall of Negus. Please codwall responsibly. Back to our show.
Stave 4, the last of the spirits.
Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any specter I've seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time, I know. Lead on, Spirit.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
Oh, I thought he never died. What was the matter with him?
Hey, what's he done with his money, huh?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know.
Yeah, it's likely to be a real cheap funeral. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's gonna go to it, huh? And perhaps maybe we should make up a party and volunteer, huh?
I don't mind going if lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I go.
Let the charwoman be first and the laundress be second. The Undertaker's man can be third. You couldn't have been in a better place. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor. I'll shut the doors of the shop.
I'm not afraid to be first and let them see it. We knew we was helping ourselves before we met here. It's no sin. Who's worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose.
Joe, now is not the time for gallantry. My bottle is smaller than these ladies' proffers. I shall go first. Here's a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a lovely brooch.
There's your account, and I wouldn't give another 6 pence if I were to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?
Open my bundle, Joe. I'm not afraid. I'll have no reproach from the likes of you. He wanted to keep him after he was dead. He would have had someone to look after him when he was struck with death. The wicked old screw. Instead of lying there, gasping out his last alone. Open the bundle and speak out plain to the value. I'm not afraid.
I am humbled in your presence, ma'am. What have you here? Sheets, towels, silver teaspoons, sugar tongs, and 2 pairs of boots. I'm always too kind to the ladies. It's a weakness, and that's the way I ruin myself. Here's your account, and if you ask me for a penny more, I'll knock off half a crown.
Now undo my bundle, Joe.
What do you call this, Ben curtains.
Aye, bed curtains.
You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all, while he was just laying there?
Yes, I do. And why not? He ain't likely to need them now, I dare say. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have wasted it, not been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Well, putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Someone was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it ain't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body, and he didn't look uglier than he did in that one.
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it. Here's your accounting.
Oh. You see? He frightened everyone away from us when he was alive, and it profited us when he was dead.
Spirit, I see the case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this? I cannot pull back to cover. I beg you, do not entreat me to do so, for I shall weep. I have no more power to withdraw the veil and to dismiss you, spirit, from my side. Strike, shadows, strike. If this man could be raised up now, what would his foremost thoughts be? An avarice? Hard dealings? Gripping cares? I dare not think. Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson, trust me. Let us go. If there is any person in this town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you.
Is it good or bad?
Bad.
Oh, we're quite ruined then.
No, there's hope yet, Caroline.
If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened.
He's past relenting. He's dead. This is what the half-drunken woman said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay. And what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying.
To whom will our debt be transferred?
I don't know. But before that time, we shall be ready with the money. And we will not find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with lighter hearts, Caroline.
Let me see some tenderness connected with this death. Will that dark chamber, Spirit, which we left just now, will forever be present to me.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them.
The color hurts my eyes, makes them weak by candlelight. I wouldn't for the world show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. It must be near his time.
Past it rather, but I think he walks a little slower than he used to his last evening's mother.
I've known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed.
And so have I, but he was very light to carry. Father loved me, so that it was no trouble at all.
And there's your father at the door.
Good evening, Mother. Good evening, children.
Good evening, Father.
You win today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how great a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on Sunday. Child. My dear, you'll be surprised to hear that I saw Mr. Scrooge's nephew today in the street. You can see I was a little down. I told him of our distress. He is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you've ever heard. I'm hardly sorry for Mr. Cratchit, he said, and hardly sorry for your good wife. By the by, how did he ever knew that? I do not know.
Knew what, my dear?
That you are a good wife.
Everyone knows that.
Well observed, my boy. I hope they do. Hardly sorry for your good wife, he said. If I can be of any service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card. That's where I live. Pray, come to me. Now, it wasn't for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us so much as his kind way about this. It's quite delightful. Seeing as if he's known our Tiny Tim and felt with us.
I'm sure he's a good soul.
You would be sure of it, my dear, if you saw and spoke with him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if you got Peter a better situation.
Only hear that, Peter.
And then Peter will be keeping company with someone and filling himself up for himself.
Oh, get along with you.
It's just as likely as not. One of these days, though, there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and wherever we part from one another, I'm sure that we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim shall, or on this first party that was ever among us.
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, when he was a little child, we should not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget Tiny Tim in doing so.
No, never, Father.
I am very happy. I am very happy.
Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. This court through which we hurry now is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The house is yonder. Why do you point away? Before I draw near to that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which if preserved, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it thus with what you show me. No, Spirit, no, Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I might have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change the shadow which you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all year. I will live in the past, present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut off the lessons that they teach me. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on the stone.
Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an altercation in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
Stave 5. The end of it. Yes! And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. He was so fluttered and glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears.
I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this day. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. They are not torn down. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadow of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be, I know they will. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everyone. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. You there, boy, what's today? What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? It's Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. They're spirits. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the Poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I do.
Intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one.
What? The one as big as me?
Delightful boy, it's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes!
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Then go and buy it.
What?
No. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow. He went downstairs to open the door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, awaiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. He scarcely ever noticed it had before. What an honest expression it had on its face. What a wonderful knocker. The poulterer arrived with the turkey, and Scrooge was delighted by its size. It was as big as Tiny Tim.
Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
The chuckle from which he said this, and the chuckle from which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut off the end of his nose, he would have put a piece of sticker plastic over it and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself in all his best and at last got on to the streets.
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness to accept my offering to your charity in the amount of...
Lord bless me! My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?
Yes, my dear sir. I don't know what to say to such.
Don't say anything. Please, come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
Thank you. I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you.
Walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge often said afterward that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest of them all. He went to church, walked about the streets, watched the people hurrying to and fro, patted children on the head, questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up into the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could have given him such happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Is your master at home, my dear?
Yes, sir.
Where is he then, love?
He's in the dining room, sir, along with the mistress. I'll show you upstairs if you please.
Thank you. He knows me. I'll go in. My dear Fred.
Why, bless my soul. Who's that?
It's your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in? It was a mercy they didn't shake his arm off. He felt at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. He was early at the office next morning. Oh, if he could only be there first to catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon, and he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was a full 18.5 minutes behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open so that he might see Bob come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. This shall not be repeated. I was rather making merry yesterday, sir.
Now, look, I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am about to raise your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. We will discuss your affairs this afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and bite another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the old good city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. It was all said that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.
God bless us, everyone.
Thank you, folks. I'd like to take this time to appreciate you for coming out tonight and to introduce our players. We have, as the narrators, Jim Haacke and Shanice Lawton. Scrooge is Alec Rogers. Bob Cratchit, Marley, and Man 3, Mark Galbraith. Fred, young Scrooge, Carolyn's husband, is Brian Coleman. The spirit of Christmas present and Old Joe, Tim Peters. Peter, boy Scrooge, and two young Cratchits, Alex Summerlin. Child, Tiny Tim, two young Cratchits, Eli Borden. Gent 1, Belle's husband, Topper, Undertaker's man, Robert London. Fezziwig, Guest 1 and Man 1, Scott McGrath. Gent 2, Guest 2 and Man 2, Mike Borden. Fan, Martha and Carolyn, Lindsey, Sam. Fred's wife, Mrs. Dilber, Leah Hughes. Belle, Mrs. Cratchit, Betsy Winkle. The charwoman and maid, Stacy Cronin. The announcer, Belinda, and I don't know, Ghost of Christmas Past, that would be me. Once again, our Foley's effect director and designer tonight is Jonna Lahaye. And our theater director, Carrie Smith. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a Merry Christmas.